and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I am here to go through a mid-month review for the month of March, but also to do a wrap-up for the month of February. So if you're familiar with my channel, if you follow me, you may have noticed that I did not do a February wrap-up. I was going through some health issues here in February and a little bit into March. It seems like I'm on the up and up, which is good news. However, I did not film a February wrap-up because I wasn't feeling well and because I'd actually only read 2 books in the second half of February. If you would like to see what I read in the first half of February, I will go ahead and link that up above. But in this video, I'm going to go ahead and just go through my February stats as well as review those 2 books. And then I'll let you know how the month of March is going. I will review the 5 books I have finished so far, as well as let you know what I still am hoping to pick up in the second half of the month. All right, so as far as my general stats go, as I mentioned, my health wasn't the best, and unfortunately it wasn't the kind of illness where you can sit in bed and reading all day. So I actually only ended up reading 8 books in the month of February, which, considering I read 22 in January, is definitely a decrease, but I do think that I did go into a bit of a reading slump there after Squash That Series, which is a readathon I took part in January and a little bit into February, but that is totally fine. 8 is a solid number, and I ended up reading 1,977 pages. I believe in February I only listened to 1 audiobook, so I only have 11.8 hours of audiobook listening in February. And unfortunately the ratings weren't that great either, so my average rating was a 3.63 for the month. As far as the star rating breakdown goes, I had 3 3-star reads, I had 2 3.5-star reads, I had 1 4-star read, and I had 2 4.5-star reads. Going into the first book that I read in the second half of February, we have Pucking Around by Emily Rath. And this is one of the reasons I probably didn't read so much in the second half, because this book is over 700 pages. So she was definitely a chonker, but I ended up giving it 4 stars. This is a contemporary romance. It does have polyamory in it. So we are following a young woman named Rebecca, and she gets the opportunity to do kind of a residency with a new hockey team called the Rays. And when she shows up there, she sees that one of their players, Jake, is actually someone she had a one-night stand with a few weeks ago, and she and Jake had just had this wonderful connection from the beginning. And so clearly when she shows up, he is very interested in continuing their relationship, despite the fact that when he had woken up the next morning, she was gone. And she is a little bit reluctant to do this because she's worried that it will jeopardize both her career as well as his, because she is actually the daughter of a rather famous rock star, and she has a little bit of baggage with her when it comes to paparazzi drama. Things get a little bit more complicated when she realizes that she has feelings for Caleb, Jake's best friend and the team's equipment manager. And then on top of that, she also starts to develop feelings for the goalie, Ilmari. But eventually throughout the story, all 4 of them start to get together. I will say, relationship dynamic wise, Ilmari is only with Rebecca. Even though all 4 of them do things together, he is technically not in like a romantic relationship with Caleb and Jake, though Jake and Caleb are definitely in a romantic relationship with each other. I, for the most part, had a good time with this book. I was a little nervous going into it. It was said to be 700 pages of smut. Will I say the second half is definitely very smut heavy? Yes. Is the first half, though, not really. I would say that it does take a few hundred pages before I would say it gets to become a little bit too much on the smut side. I thought that the pacing of the first half was really well done. We really had some time to develop the characters and their relationship before they started just going to Pound Town over and over again. That being said, I did think that the ending did get to the repetitive side of things, especially when every time they were having some sort of deep conversation, it always had to end in a sex scene. I was like, sometimes you can just talk. It's totally fine. And then sometimes I felt like the discussions they were having were a little bit on the repetitive side, especially when it came to the concerns that Jake was expressing. I feel like he was a character who I noticed was saying kind of the same things over and over again the most. So I would say that this book would definitely benefit from a really good edit. There was probably a few scenes that could have been shrunk down, if not completely taken out. But overall, I enjoyed most of the characters. I thought that the smut was usually well written. Sometimes it got a little too descriptive, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun. And I thought that the drama, both within the relationship as well as anything that was happening outside of the relationship, was entertaining as well. So if you don't mind a 700-page romance, then I think you should definitely check it out. I will say when it comes to length, I'm a little bit more lenient when it comes to polyamory, because you're not just developing one relationship between two people, you are creating multiple relationships between multiple characters that you really need to get to know. And this book is multi-POV, so you do hear from all 4 of those characters, which I really enjoyed. Up next, and the last book that I read in February, we have With a Vengeance by Freydis Moon, and I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. In the story, we are following Kai, and they are a non-binary character who's returning to their hometown to kind of get together their mother's affairs after her death. They are not overly excited to be back home. They had a very complicated relationship with their family because their family was rather religious and therefore did not approve of them being queer and them not identifying as female. And that is something that they have to grapple with throughout the entire story, especially since they are now the sole survivor of their family. Everyone else has passed on, and they will never be able to mend any relationships with them. Alongside their grief, they have another problem, and that is that they're kind of possessed by a demon. Kai has had a very rough year, and apparently at the lowest point of their life, they had made a deal with a demon, and they kind of start to realize that this demon is real and not just a creation of their mental illness. And this demon seems very set on keeping Kai alive, and eventually a relationship begins to build between the two of them. This is a rather messy relationship, and at times it could be considered a little bit toxic. Elios is a demon, and Kai is not the nicest person. They've had a rough life, and so they're definitely someone who's going to just lash out. They have a lot of anger, they have a lot of grief, they're very insecure in themselves, they have body dysmorphia, they have depression. Life is just not a 10 out of 10 for them. And while they're here trying to settle their mother's affairs, they are starting to realize that their mother may have been employing people who are not legal here in the country for the family business, and one of the cops seems to be looking into that. And Kai is kind of trying to figure out if they want this cop to just leave them alone, to give them the information that they need, or if they want to go ahead and protect these people and maybe even continue the family business themselves. And they do this alongside Elios, as well as the young woman who was helping her mother towards the end of her life with her bookkeeping, as well as just helping her mother take care of herself. There's a lot of things I enjoyed about this book. For one, I loved the writing. I felt like it was absolutely perfect for this story. It was very beautiful and sometimes rather dark, which I felt really matched the characters as well as everything that the characters were going through. I also really enjoyed the relationship between Kai and this young woman who had been a part of their mother's life in the way Kai was never allowed to be because their mother never accepted them for who they were. So it was a very complex relationship where Kai hated her, was jealous of her, but also understood why their mother was drawn to her because they are drawn to her as well. In a way, reaching out to her in hopes of developing a friendship. And it's a very messy one, but it was a very interesting one to watch. I also really enjoyed Kai and Elios's relationship. It was definitely one of those where Elios fell first, where he was the one who was kind of starting to make it known that he was interested in them being more than just demon and person possessed by demon. And I felt like he had a very soft side to him that really was something that Kai needed. Kai was someone who thought that pain was what they would deserve and what they wanted, and sometimes it was what they needed, but at other times they needed someone who was a little bit more gentle, while simultaneously putting their foot down and letting Kai know what they're doing wrong and how they're screwing up their own life. And Elios was definitely the person to do that. So very interesting relationship between the two of them. I really liked the way that the story ended. I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. And overall, beautiful writing, really interesting characters, a good amount of diversity in the story. The author is also Hispanic and queer, so there is definitely a lot of reasons to check out this book, and I will definitely be checking out more from this author. Up next, we are going to go ahead and jump into the books that I have read so far here in March. And to start off the month, I read 2 books from the same series, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about both of those. The first one is going to be It's Witchcraft, and the next one is going to be Where There's Smoke. And these should be volumes 5 and 6 of the Criminal Intention series by Cole McCade. I gave It's Witchcraft 4.5 stars, and I gave Where There's Smoke 5 stars. I've been waiting to give this series a 5 stars because I feel like it's just been getting better and better with every book, and I finally got it with this one. In this series, we are following Malcolm and Sanjay, and they are homicide detectives for the Baltimore Police Department. Each book, we are usually following a different crime, a different homicide that these two have to investigate, but in the background, there seems to be a larger threat looming. In Where There's Witchcraft, there is a crime against a queer man, and we see our characters kind of flash back to the crime that they solved in the first book of this series because that also involved queer men, and both of our characters being queer, this obviously makes things very difficult for them. They're definitely struggling with the fact that there are people targeting their community, and this one also seems to possibly involve a little bit of devil worship. While I didn't absolutely love the mystery aspect of this book specifically, I really did enjoy the continuation of the character development that we have between Sanjay and Malcolm. This is definitely a slow burn between the two of them, and it is just getting yummier and yummier by the book. And I felt like in this book we were also starting to get a little bit of a bigger picture of some of the things that had happened in Sanjay's past that may be coming back to haunt him in the present. So lots of interesting things were happening in this one. Over here in Where There's Smoke, this book I thought was utter perfection because I feel like it was the first time where I was really interested in the mystery aspect of the story as well. In this book, there is possibly a homicide, but we're not really sure because the body is missing. And we are following Sanjay and Malcolm as they are trying to find the body of a young woman who was kidnapped from her boyfriend's car. They're unsure if the boyfriend hurt her or if the boyfriend had help hurting her or if it was someone completely different. But the boyfriend himself seems to be in pretty bad shape and in the hospital, and they are definitely on a time crunch because he told them that she was severely injured the last time he saw her, and so they need to try and find her before she dies of her injuries if she isn't already dead. And when I tell you, I was at the edge of my seat throughout this entire book because I was like, I literally have no idea if this girl is alive or dead. Like, a lot of times Malcolm was like, yeah, I think she's still alive, because he wanted to be optimistic, and Sonjay was like, well, based off the amount of blood we found, she's probably not alive. And I was just like, please let this poor young woman be alive. It was just such a stressful situation. They were interacting with her poor mother, and I just felt the emotions. I felt the stress of our characters and the way that they were feeling like they were failing this mother without being able to provide her information about what happened to her daughter. And I really felt for the characters. I felt for the victims. I didn't know who the criminal was, and so I was definitely at the edge of my seat to see what went down on that unfortunate night. Alongside this very interesting crime, Sanjay and Malcolm's relationship definitely just blew up in a good way, not like in a bad way. It just finally, it was like we broke through the ice, and the two of them are definitely getting down to admitting their feelings and not holding back so much when it comes to these important discussions that they want to have with each other about how they feel about each other, how their pasts are going to impact their relationships, and what kind of future they want. So just hearing these conversations, I was like, oh my god, they're talking like they're gonna get together. And I was just like so happy. And that last chapter, I reread that chapter a few times. I'm not even going to lie. That chapter was chef's kiss. All of this happening using Cole McCade's incredible writing. It was definitely a 5-star read, and I really would want people to read this series if you like slow burn romances, if you like kind of those serial mystery novels where you kind of follow a different crime, but you're following the same detectives, same characters, and you're learning more about them and everything's messy. Then this is the series for you. You got to check it out. So having a great time with this series and can't wait to continue. Up next, we have a book that is going to be in a vlog. In fact, a couple of the books I'm going to be talking about are going to be in a vlog, but that vlog is not coming out until next Monday, hopefully, if I finish it in time. I'm still working on some of the books, but that is going to be A History of Fear by Luke Domas, and this is a contemporary / historical, because we kind of jump, between this character's present as well as their past, but pretty much it is, I think, around 2017-ish, and a young college student has murdered another college student, and everyone is relatively surprised. It seems very out of character for him, especially when he claims that the devil was the one who made him do it. And this book is actually a book within a book. Essentially, the reporter who had broke the story about this man and why he supposedly murdered this other man ends up collecting a lot of transcripts from people they interviewed involved in the case, as well as reading some documents that the killer himself wrote, and turns it kind of into a book trying to figure out, was this man actually possessed by the devil, or was he just mentally ill, or what the heck was going on? And so this whole book that we're reading is actually that book. So we're getting a combination of Grayson's journal, Grayson being the killer, as well as interviews with his roommate, his brother. We're getting some snippets of the court testimonies, as well as some people from his past, as well as the interpretations of the journalist themselves. I ended up giving this story 4 stars. I feel like the majority of the book kind of fluctuated between like sometimes even a 3-star and a 3.5 and a 4-star. And then there were even parts where I was like, maybe a 4.5 4.5 star. And it was such a roller coaster ride of enjoyment when it comes to this book. But I feel like at the end of the day, it definitely had me thinking about it after I finished it, because I really did enjoy the very, very ending. Like the ending, I was like, I don't know if I really like the explanation that the author came up with for why Grayson did what he did. But then the very end, like one of those like last sentence situations, I was like, I see what you did there. That was well done, sir. So I will say that this book definitely had the perfect ending. I really don't think it could have ended any other way. And my enjoyment, despite the fact that it went up and down throughout the book, I think it just had an issue to do with pacing. Sometimes I felt like we were meandering a bit too much. Other times things were very exciting and I wanted to see where things were going. But at the end of the day, I would definitely say that you would need to like a slower paced horror slash thriller if you're going to pick up this book, because there was definitely a few slow points where I kind of felt like I was reading it just because I wanted to see how it ended, not so much because I really cared about what was happening in the moment. I would also say it took a while for the character Grayson to grow on me. I don't think he's supposed to be overly likable. He's definitely a bit of an oddball. He's not the kind of character I was expecting to read about based off of the synopsis, and so it just took me a little while to get used to who the character actually was. But in the end, I thought that he was very interesting and definitely worth pitying. I felt bad for this man in the end, as well as most of the people that were involved with him. But a very interesting story, a very interesting concept, and I definitely think it's worth giving a read, though I would maybe save it more for the fall time just to give you better vibes. But still, very glad that I picked this up. It was definitely a book that I was interested in reading, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do so. Last physical book that I have read so far this month is going to be The God of Good Looks by Brianne McIver, and I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Unlike with A History of Fear, I feel like this book, for the most part, was a solid 4-star throughout the entire read. I will say sometimes it might have dipped a little bit to a 3.5, but overall, I did enjoy my entire reading experience of this. In this book, we are actually following 2 points of view. We are following Bianca and we are following Obadiah. Bianca is a young woman whose life has been kind of turned upside down after she got caught having an affair with a minister in Trinidad, where they are all living. This is set in Trinidad, and her career as a writer has pretty much been halted because no one will want to associate themselves with her, and she has turned to modeling to kind of make her way in life. She is actually the daughter of an incredibly powerful, rich man, but he has remarried and started a second family, and so she and him are not really close anymore. Throughout this book, she is actually trying to write a book that honors her mother, who had died of cancer, I believe, a few years prior. Obadiah, on the other hand, is someone who grew up in the slums, but he and his friend Daniel have started to scrape together a bit of a business for themselves when it comes to beauty products. And these beauty products, in hopes of getting more attention for it, they are also trying to do a beauty magazine. And so Obadiah hires Bianca to be the head editor for this magazine. He primarily does this because she's very desperate for work that isn't modeling, and so he can pay her less, and also because he's secretly hoping that she will be able to use her father's connection to help their company. I thought that this story had a lot of interesting stuff going on with it. When I started the book, I really didn't know what genre it would primarily fall under, and I would definitely make it a contemporary novel with a smidge of romance. I wouldn't exactly call it a romance, because the romance, I feel like by the end of the story, we are just starting to see it really bloom into something that could possibly turn into an actual romantic relationship. So I wouldn't want you to go into this book hoping for like a romance novel. But throughout this story, we really get to see Bianca come into herself. She is someone who was very insecure about herself because she didn't really have anyone in her life, and her ex-partner, the minister, definitely took advantage of that and in fact probably exasperated them in hopes that she would continue to need him and want to be with him. And Obadiah, honestly, in the beginning is not helping either because he's a bit of an asshole, and he is definitely wearing a bit of a mask because he feels like he needs to be an asshole because that is what the rich respect, and he is trying to get rich clientele. But together, the two of them, while they're butting heads with each other throughout the editorial process, start to show their true colors a little bit more and start to realize that the two of them can really help each other, and not just each other, but possibly even start a discussion about helping the country as a whole, because Trinidad is facing a very high crime rate, and they are wondering if they want to use their magazine, which is starting to build traction thanks to Bianca's expertise, to start commenting on the high crime rates, and not just the crimes that poor people are committing, but also the crimes that the ultra wealthy are committing. So it had some really interesting conversations throughout the story about that as well. And I think overall that the story is for the people who really enjoy character development, because we watch Obadiah as he goes from being this masked man who was very cold and off-putting and demanding to someone who is really trying to nurture the relationships that are important to him. And then we watch Bianca as she is someone who starts to really struggle with her appearance. She's someone who starts to develop an eating disorder. She struggles to see herself as beautiful and really struggles to see herself as someone who is worthy of the attention of others. And as she starts to realize her self-worth and exactly what she is capable of, while also slowly starting to recover from her eating disorder. So some trigger warnings for eating disorder throughout this story. It is somewhat subtle, but it is definitely clear that she is suffering from that. But I think overall the story just had a lot going on with it. You really started to care for the characters, especially Bianca. Obadiah, you know, I'm kind of meh about him, to be honest. You know, I think he could have used a bit more character development for me to really love him and see him as someone who's worthy of Bianca. But overall, just watching the two of them grow alongside with their business and just getting revenge on those who deserved it is always satisfying to read about. And the last book I finished, I actually finished just this morning, so I feel like my thoughts on it haven't quite solidified, but I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it here, and that is Not So Perfect Strangers by L.S. Stratton. And I listened to this via audiobook. It is actually the book club for Is Bailey Reading's Shelf That Book Club. So that is why I picked up this book. But I'm gonna be honest, I think I have to give it a 3-star rating. I feel like it was a decent book to listen to, but it's definitely not something I feel I'm really going to remember. In this book, we are following 2 different women. We are following Tasha and we are following Madison. Tasha is a Black mother who is in an abusive relationship. They are also lower middle class. Madison, on the other hand, is a wealthy white woman who is married to a wealthy white man. And we are following both of their points of view as one day Tasha is trying to escape her marriage. However, her son ends up kind of abandoning her at the hotel, and while she's driving back home, she's realizing, I'm just gonna have to stay in this relationship until my son goes to college because he's not willing to leave his father, and I'm not going to leave my son alone with this abusive man, which is very frustrating. Her son frustrated me very much throughout this story. However, while she's leaving the hotel, she sees a woman waving her down and asking her to bring her to a safe location because her abusive husband is pursuing her. And Tasha, being the victim of domestic abuse, of course, offers to help this woman. And unfortunately, that causes this woman to kind of be like, hey girl, you know, if I kill your husband, you can kill mine. And Tasha's like, no thank you. But Madison is not gonna just let her walk away from this opportunity. So I mean, I definitely think it was a fun concept. I don't think it is one that I have really read before. I just feel like the story didn't really go where I wanted it to go. I kind of wanted the story to be one of those, I support women's rights, but I support women's wrongs as well. But I can't say I 100% supported women's wrongs in this book, and neither really did Tasha. And so it was very hard for me to get on the bandwagon of killing these men. I'm like, yeah, they suck, but do they deserve to die? And I didn't want to be in a position where I was questioning that. I wanted to be like, yeah, kill these men, free yourselves, move on with your life, live, laugh, love. And that is not what I got from this story. It was very much a push and pull in how you should handle being in a domestic violence situation and how you should leave a domestic violence situation. And I didn't love that. I felt like I got a little bit bored with the story. I felt like I never really liked Madison as a character. Sometimes she was definitely entertaining to listen to, but overall not really likable. Tasha, on the other hand, I did like a lot more. I liked her storyline a little bit more. I liked the struggles that she was having with her son. That was interesting, as well as the potential side romance that she was having. That was also interesting. But overall, it was just a very mediocre book. One of those books where you're like, yeah, I'm glad I listened to it. You know, it was a good time, but I'm probably gonna forget that I listened to it. I mean, I thought that the ending was relatively satisfying. I'm not going to say I'm displeased with it, but I also felt it was slightly on the predictable side. So I feel like 3 stars is a good rating for that. All right, so those are all the books I've read so far. Let's go ahead and talk about the books that I'm currently making progress in and the books that I still need to go ahead and continue. As far as 2 books that I'm going slow and steady with, we have my nonfiction book, which is When They Call You a Terrorist, and I did finish part 1 of that, so it looks like I'm on page 138, and this one I'm kind of putting on the back burner a little bit just because I have other things I need to focus on. I'm a little bummed because I really enjoyed reading this, but it's just not really a priority read, but hopefully I can make a little bit more progress this month. I have really been enjoying it. And then we have my challenge read, which is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami, and I have been trying to read a couple chapters of this in between all my other books. Has that happened every time? No. I'm currently a little bit over 70 pages into it. I'm hoping to finish book 1. It seems that this book is broken into 3 books, and the first book is about 300 pages, so it would be really great if I got that far here in the first month. Am I optimistic? No, because I have 2 other books I need to read this month that are each over 500 pages, so not optimistic. I will say I am going back and forth on how I feel about this book. There's a part of me that is definitely intrigued, but there's a part of me that's like, do I care enough about this plot, about these characters to read it for 900 pages? I really don't know. I definitely want to go ahead and give it at least until the end of that book 1 because I am definitely not really having a good time, but I feel like I'm definitely somewhat invested. And then at the end of that first book, we'll see if I need to continue with the story or if I'm gonna go ahead and DNF, because 900 pages, it's just a lot. It really is a lot. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm slow and steady making my way through it. Since I just recently finished my last 2 books, the audiobook I just finished this morning and the physical read I finished last night, I haven't actually started my next reads yet, but I can tell you right now my next audiobook is going to be We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. And if you watched my TBR, then you know that this book fills 2 prompts, so I definitely want to get it done. Good news is that the audiobook is only 9 hours long, and with the weather being a lot nicer, I'm hoping to get out a little bit more, do a bit more more walking. And so hopefully I will go ahead and finish this relatively quickly. This is also a book that is on my These Books Will Self-Destruct list, so I'm excited to finally be getting to it. As far as my next physical read, we have The Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent, and I will probably be starting this as soon as I finish this video. This is 506 pages. Like I said, I have a couple 500-page books to get through this month, and this is the first of them, but I'm hoping, since it is a fantasy romance, that it will go a little bit quicker. But super excited for these to be my next 2 books, and obviously you will go ahead and see my thoughts on those and my wrap up. Then the only other 2 books that I have is my second challenge book, which is A Beautiful Boy by David Sheff. This is definitely the book that is at the bottom of my priority list, but I don't want to fall behind too much in my challenge books, especially considering the first book I pulled is so long. So it would be nice if I could get it started, but we will see, because I also have the third book in the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, which is another 500 pages. Once again, this is a bind up, but that book is still over 500 pages of high fantasy, so it will take me probably at least a little while to get through this, but we're gonna do our best. We're gonna do what we can do. All right, guys, so those are all the books that I have read. We went through a lot in this video. This wrap up might be a little longer than usual just because I put in some February information as well, but now that my health is on the up and up, hopefully things get back to normal and my reading schedule gets back to normal as well. I would love to know how your month is going so far. What's your favorite book that you've read so far, and what book are you still really hoping to get to by the end of the month? As always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!